used?
Essentially, if you look at today's German intelligence, the BND, it is the Gehlen org. That's Reinhard Gehlen, right, from the Nazis. He was a really effective intelligence operator who set up all the fascist intelligence networks throughout Europe. When the Germans lost World War II, the CIA went and just took over all of those networks and made them CIA networks. And they set up the German intelligence network, the BND, out of Gehlen org. And by the way, some of those networks are the same in Ukraine. And that's why you've had neo-ins in Ukraine since World War II that the CIA still uses.
And the justification was rather than working for us than the commies.
They also gave Gehlen himself immunity if he would hand over all of his intelligence networks.
So you're talking about Nazi gold. Let's go to Fort Knox next. What do you think is going to happen when they do this inventory check?
Have you ever seen the James Bond movie Goldfinger?
I loved it, yeah, when I was a kid.
I think it's going to be like empty, right? I think there was some kind of Goldfinger plot that happened at some point. I mean, I don't really know if it's empty. I'm just halfway. I'm tongue in cheek, halfway joking. I don't know. I mean, somebody had a good idea that they should convert Fort Knox into being a fort where there's Bitcoin miners, and then the whole thing should just be Bitcoin mining, and that'd be the only way that the U.S. will ever get out of paying, its supposed national debt, which is fraudulent debt anyway. But I have no idea what somebody was even saying that they thought, well, if they go in there and there's nothing there, they're not going to tell us because that would freak everybody out. You have economic collapse. So who knows? And who knows what to believe?
Yeah, didn't Germany request their gold back at one point, and they only got 40%, and then they suddenly went quiet about it, like someone had been paid off.
I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, gold seems to go missing quite often. I mean, there's like giant stashes of gold that somehow we hear about in history, like it just goes missing, and nobody knows where it is. Anyway, I mean, I don't know a lot or have a lot to say on that, other than that there's. Who knows, man? I wish I had more info.
All right, keep the questions coming in, folks. And Jay is an expert on esoteric Hollywood, secret society activity, eyes wide shut, that kind of stuff. And you can check his 3 books out now, Esoteric Hollywood, parts 1 to 3. So Bailey is asking whether you will elaborate on the secretum. Secretum?
I unfortunately don't know what that is. I wish I did.
I don't know what that is either. So Rosebud wants to know, is there anyone in this world you trust?
Yeah, I mean, I think over time you can get a good gut sense about people that's pretty accurate. You can have reservations even if you don't necessarily trust somebody. I mean, I think a lot of people in power, government, presidents, these kinds of people, billionaires, I look at what they do rather than what they say. And so that's a much better guide for people at that level. I look at people's track records. If I'm interacting with people in media or show business or entertainment, comedy, whatever, most people that I've interacted with, they're pretty straight up. I mean, usually there's a bad apple, but that's maybe 1 in 20 people is a bad apple. So I don't think that we have to adopt some kind of like overly suspicious, overly paranoid attitude. But most of the time at really high levels, people are, even if they're not personally compromised, they have to compromise to be in the situations of power that they're in.
Exactly. Do you think there would be economic collapse if the real Jeffrey list of clients came out?
I don't know if there'd be an economic collapse unless a lot of the clients were particularly from the banking or Federal Reserve structures, maybe in that sense. There might be a massive collapse in confidence in the establishment, but that's already kind of there. So I don't see that as a very good excuse for withholding this information, because I mean, that debacle last week just kind of makes people more suspicious.
Yeah, Sophia. I mean, this client list now, it's all like the old regime embedded in it, really, isn't it? The ones that were the deepest, like Clinton, So if it did come out, then I think these people are already, these are the globalists that are falling, as the title on the thumbnail says on this video. And it could be weaponized. Perhaps Trump is just firing shots across the bow about releasing things to have these deep staters back off him, because he knows his life's under constant threat.
Exactly. Yeah, there's a lot of reasons why they, tease this stuff, in the public, in the media.
It's ammo.
Yeah. Well.
So, Laureen Renee, what do you think of Gene Hackman's death? We've been covering this. It's just got weirder and weirder.
Yeah, I mean, the initial assessment was that it was a suspicious death. I think the dog also being dead is very odd. There was immediate disinfo that was put out yesterday that he was going to talk about Epstein's list. That's not true. I have no knowledge if he knew anything about that. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't. But I think it's always suspicious when high-level A-list Hollywood people suddenly turn up dead. Not just them, but also people around them, including their pets. So that could suggest a hit. It could suggest, something going on. I also know that, when you see some of these deaths that where people are, how can I say this, autoerotic type things, those are also sometimes hits. And the reason that they might be hits, I'm not saying that people can't be into, weird sex stuff. It's just rather that those are great covers for when you do a hit. You can cover the event with it, making it look like, right, they killed themselves. And I didn't see Randy Quaid, but I know that, Randy Quaid has been saying that there are, hit squads for the last 10, 15 years. And I think when Rose McGowan came out with her information, people found that to be more credible because she was talking about certain private agencies that were stalking and harassing her. Black Cube, I think is what she said. So yeah, I think this is absolutely plausible. I think a lot of popular people, I don't know in the case of Hackman, obviously, but there are people who are taken care of or taken out. And I mean, just think about an A-list, let's say entertainer, musician, their record catalog, if they're taken out or if they die in some way, I mean, the catalog shoots up. So there's a motivation right there, right? And there was a comment a minute ago about Hollywood Babylon. I just wanted to mention that. So my books are like Hollywood Babylon, except that when Kenneth Anger wrote his, he was writing about old Hollywood and the scandals that go on, like Fatty Arbuckle being involved in, sleeping with some woman. And I think he slept on top of her and crushed her. So, I mean, that was just a crazy story. But my books are not about that per se. They're about the meanings in the films and the different secret societies that people are involved in Hollywood, how that comes out in actual, the films can be a revelatory thing. So I talk a lot about, the CIA's involvement in Hollywood. A lot of A-list actors have been spies and work for the CIA, as well as other intelligence agencies, British intelligence, Israeli intelligence, all of that's involved. So the books are not like Kenneth Anger's books is just basically about, gossip and Hollywood deaths. But mine is more about film symbolism and secret societies.
So Airy Dispatches is asking, how satanic is Hollywood?
I think that Satanism and satanic cults are popular in Hollywood. I think that many actors, producers, and people in those circles have been involved in different cults, secret societies. Many of them are devotees of Aleister Crowley. Many of them have been just in the Church of Satan, which is a more of a atheistic kind of organization. And then you've got all kinds of weird Kabbalistic, cults and sects, people like Madonna, Demi Moore, I think. And then you've got Scientology, which, although it's not directly, quote, satanic, I would say is a mind control type of cult. L. Ron Hubbard left Crowley's cult to create Scientology. So, and that's a huge section of Hollywood. So a lot, I would say a lot, but not everybody.
Next question. Diddy lawsuit today with him directly involved with Tupac. Any comment on this?
I mean, I've been following this, history and the background of their, squabbles, going back to Death Row Records, going back to, the death of Biggie Smalls and all of that. There's a guy who wrote a book from my publisher, Potash, Drugs as a Weapon Against Us. And a lot of that book deals with the East Coast, West Coast rap war, as well as going back into the history of music. His book is more focused on the music industry. And there's a lot of, FBI, federal informant, gang involvement, and all that stuff too. So I'm not going to be surprised if Diddy is involved in the Tupac event. In fact, I think that's probably likely.
Nisi wants to know whether there's a relationship between Zelensky and Soros, or Soros's role in Ukraine.
Yeah, so I think he began the soft power color revolution operations even in the late 80s in the Ukraine, and then into the 90s. And the reason that it was that early is that they wanted, after the Cold War, to make sure that those Eastern European countries, the Eastern Bloc, could be transitioned into the Western financial model. And one of the global elite books that we just recently covered was Jacques Attali, who's the Kissinger of France. He's the sort of a mentor to various French presidents. Attali was in charge of the European banking structure, integrating the post-Cold War Eastern Bloc countries into the EU banking structure. And they wanted to make sure that they could immediately get those countries into IMF debt, you see. And so that was a very key role there. So that's why they had to start so early in making sure that Ukraine, when they started having elections, didn't get people elected who were, favorable to Putin or to Russia. So that began in the 80s and 90s. Even Reagan, Reagan was involved in privatizing the intelligence, the stuff that the CIA used to do, and putting it under humanitarian aid cover. So a lot of that stuff with USAID being fronts, being shells, a lot of the operations that we're talking about today, including Ukraine, were run out, and Serbia as well, by the way. Serbia was, when they took down Milosevic, it was the exact same operation. They used the cutout, which was called the OSCE, Organization for Security Cooperation in Europe. And the OSCE was basically just packed with British intelligence, CIA, US naval intelligence, all these, operatives essentially for NATO, to ensure that they could take down, in Serbia in 2000, it was the people power color revolution. In Ukraine, it was the orange revolution. So it's all the same structure and model.
Right, I've got a heavy question for you here, Jay. Let's see. From Hushed Tones. How has the Enlightenment trapped both ends of the political spectrum into a crap paradigm? Progressives want a revolution. Dispensational evangelical want the end times. Is this a coincidence?
I think that the best way to understand this in our day is the model of a circle of acceptable political or social discourse. So what the social engineers and the power structure does is they make sure that you only ask questions or discuss topics within a circle. Anything outside of that circle is considered not even a valid question. There's actual studies on this. I did a podcast with a guy that used to consult at I think the Defense Department, and he did a whole lecture on this about how the media control works. So any question, like if you were to say question the Enlightenment, that would be a question outside of the circle. It's not even a allowable, relevant question. So it's a very tightly controlled discourse and dialectic that's allowed in the media. And I think dispensational evangelical end time stuff is just another one of these control positions that makes you useless, ineffective, and an idiot, basically. All of that stuff, by the way, was set up by foreign PACs and their funding, shall we say, in America, to get people to default to worshiping certain places in the Middle East, if you understand what I'm saying.
Of course. Why is Trump against hardworking federal workers who are not a part of the deep state? That's from Tashel.
I don't know if maybe she's not in America, or maybe she's, you know, not understanding how the deep state bureaucracy works. It's nothing to do with picking out people who are hardworking. It's rather that there has been a security state establishment that's a breakaway establishment that kind of works as a shadow government within the US government. So this is what really runs the country, and they're directly sort of subservient to people above them that are committed to the globalist projects. So that model is actually the model that the British Empire itself set up for itself, with this inner circle that would run things, Cecil Rhodes, et cetera, Rothschild Milner Circle. And then they had a society of helpers, which was about 6,000 or so academics, people in media, people in business, who were true believers in the faux democracy that the people in this inner structure promoted. And so the same model was set up in America through Pratt House and through CFR, all that kind of stuff. So a lot of the people that you're talking about, they actually are not, they may be good intention and they may be hard workers, but they're working for institutions that actually undermine the US and national sovereignty.
Yeah, a lot of good people are in organizations that have been co-opted by the vested interests. So Uber Fuber, do you think Gulf War I was about oil, or do you think they really believed he had weapons of mass destruction?
Funny you said this, because I just read in a so the two official historians of British intelligence history, Andrews and Green, they wrote a giant book, which, by the way, came out about 10 years after my book. Their book is about spies in entertainment and spies in Hollywood. And towards the end of the book, they have a chapter on the guy who invented. You got to hear this, Sean. You're not going to believe this, but I'll show you the book if you don't believe me. So this is the official British intelligence history guys talking about spies in movies and spies in entertainment, right? These are the guys that wrote the official history of MI5, MI6, okay? The last chapter of the book, towards the end, it talks about the guy who came up with the weapons of mass destruction stuff about Saddam. I forget his name. It's some kind of weird code name. Well, they eventually figured out who he was, and guess where he came up with the fake intelligence for the deadly gas that Saddam was storing?
Was it Israel?
No. It's from a movie. It's
Mm.
purely invented. Okay. It's The Rock with Nicolas Cage and Sean Connery. And at the end of the movie, when Nicolas Cage has those giant green balls of gas, that's literally where the guy got it from. And he put that out as intel. Saddam is collecting these balls of deadly gas. And so this is the admission of the establishment telling you this. This is how stupid they think everybody is. They can take stuff from a 1997 movie, put it out as weapons of mass destruction intelligence. Everybody believes it because they've been propagandized by the movies to believe it. And then they can say 25 years later, yeah, that was from a movie and you all believed it.
And they made billions, trillions of taxpayers' money. All right, I'm an American too, and definitely not Israeli. So why are we funding Israel's existence?
I have 2 talks on my channel that go pretty deep into the history of this. This is a really complex, it goes back to the British Empire. And there were famous British spies who were sent out by the British Empire at the turn of the last century to scout for oil. And this is people like St. John Philby, Gertrude Bell, T.E. Lawrence. There's a whole host of these, right? And it's not just the British, the French, Americans, and Russia. They were all sending spies into the Middle East because this is right when people were figuring out that there was oil. So a lot of it it's not just Gulf War. All of that region has to do with what they call black gold. And so there's a great book by a friend